to dive into the thing that floated the other day when we were chatting. Obviously, having as a segue, having very much enjoyed the winter, listening and then being able to watch the cricket in India. And of course, we've got an incredibly exciting summer coming up, with particularly with New Zealand and India coming to play over here. But then next winter we roll into the Ashes, which of course to anybody with an eye to history, it's one of the most established sporting rivalries in the whole world. And of course, in this country, so many of the more recent converts to the game tend to think back to the 2005 Ashes, which, gosh, already was 16 years ago, but it's still such a seminal series with those massive ebbs and flows, the momentum flows across the series. But it's for me, it's not the greatest series, because within my lifestyle, my lifetime, I'm 57, and I remember back to the 1980s, 1981. The hairs on the back of my neck all stand up when I just think of the words Headingley in 1981, because that was such an astonishing game. The momentum shifting both ways so quickly. England.
Was that the same game that they had the 500 to 1 bet?
That's the one. And the thing was that the first innings, Australia batted really well. John Dyson, who is a very pedestrian-looking batsman, he made a really good, a huge century, and so they had a big, dominating first innings score, and that scoreboard pressure obviously told, because then England were rolled over in no time at all. I remember Gooch was out twice in one day for next to nothing. As England followed on. And so when England went out to the second innings, they were already 5 or 6 down, and still behind Australia's first innings score. So when both of them came to the wicket, they were still, I think, 50, 70 runs, something like that adrift. And
I've seen
both of them.
Sorry, I've seen on that some of the video replays of that have been around the fact that they thought both Botham and Willis hadn't had good series, and that their careers were on the line.
Yeah, very much so. The first test, in fact, the first 2 tests, both of them was still captain. And England lost the first test quite comprehensively. The second test was that draw that's died away, and you could almost feel the heart of English cricket dying as you watched both of them in the second innings go out to bat, and he was out first or second ball trying to sweep. I think it was Ray Bright, the Australian spinner, who was bowled round his legs. Yeah. And that seminal moment, that iconic image of him walking back in, and all the members in the MCC, all of them going, rather than offering even a token clap to him as he walked back in. And there was that, I think Raymond Illingworth was the manager at the time, and you had that whole thing in the press of, did he push, or was he did he jump, or was he pushed? Did he resign before he was actually sacked as captain? So as when England went into the third test, with Brearley having been brought back, dusted off, and pumped a bit more life into the tyres, there were those interesting moments, because of course Brearley was such a brilliant psychologist. The way he handled his players was astonishing. The way he got so much more out of them, and he challenged Botham's ego to say, well, come on, are you going to perform? And he offered Botham the chance to actually step back from that game. And it was, you what? You what? Of course I'm playing. And Botham made the only 50 in England's first innings, and then that 149 in the second, where he was, I think the expression he used when Dilly came to the wicket was, it was time to give it some humpity. And so everything that he middled went for miles. Everything he'd got an edge, it flew off the edge and never went to hand. And so he and Dilly, and then Old, and then finally Willis, got got to the point where they staggered to, I think it was 130 lead, and then Willis was out, leaving both from high and dry on 149 not out, and they then straight back out again, with Australia only wanting about 130 to win. And I think both of them got an early wicket, and then Willis coming downhill. As you said before, he was also on the edge of being put out to grass as an England player, but coming downhill with the wind behind him, that enormous, massive hair, that long snaking run up, and the big, the coil of his action. I used to impersonate this in the nets at school, and sending the ball down at terrific pace with that very late in swing. He just ripped through the Australian side. It's 8 for 43, I think. And the last wicket, when he cleaned Ray Bright's middle stump out of the ground, was just such a one of those moments when the whole country almost exploded. And of course, that then was followed by the match at Edgbaston, which is quite a low scoring game, but both of them coming on late, 5 wickets for 1 in no time at all, which just again rolled over the Australian tail. And then back to Old Trafford, where he made another thumping, was it 118, I think it was. This is the classic scenes of him playing the hook shot with his head down, tucked down, and the ball swatted away, almost by telepathy. But then, of course, even that wasn't new. That enormous roller coaster. It's not the first time that England had done that to Australia, because if you drag your mind back to, was it the winter of 1894-95, Queen Victoria on the throne, the telephone was still a ridiculous gimmick, and cars even still had a man with a red flag walking along in front of them. The England tour to Australia, led by Andrew Stoddart, playing these newfangled test matches. They played what was a monumentous 5-match series. The first one to be played in Sydney, it was very hot. It was early December. It was humid. And Australia batted first. They had a bit of a dodgy start, 21 for 3 at one point. But then George Giffen made 161. Sid Gregory made 200. And so they then finally reached 586, an incredibly big score, even for nowadays would be a big score.
Yeah.
And England never really got going. No real failures in the side, but nobody actually went on to make the sort of match-defining score that they needed. And so England all out for 3-2-5. Obviously, then asked to follow on, and Albert Ward from Lancashire made 117, which got them to 437. But then Australia only needed 177 to win. At the close of the 4th day, the Australians had reached 113 for 2, looking very well set. And I suppose probably not by modern standards, but by the standards of the day, England probably felt quite justified in going out and drowning their sorrows a bit overnight.
Couple off the tap.
To the point where somewhat. And Bobby Peel, one of the bowlers, was still so relaxed the following morning. They had to put him in a cold shower to get him sober enough to get him out on the pitch. And they then discovered that it had rained overnight. The pitch looked as if it had been watered. And now it's the sort of pitch that you'd only described as sporting if you weren't the one having to bat on it. Yeah. So Australia still only needing 64 to win, but collapsed under the pressure of an initial flow of wickets that turned into something of a cascade. And so they're all out for 166. Peel himself, having sobered up, took 6 wickets. And England took a slim 10-run victory. This, of course, set the series up. They won the second test in Melbourne then fell apart quite catastrophically at Adelaide and back at Sydney. The Sydney game was an Australian win by an innings and quite a lot. But that meant that the series was square when they came back to Melbourne for the final test. Again, nip and tuck. First Australia, over 400. England nearly matched it. Australia then bowled out for 267, sorry. So England needed 297, lost a couple of wickets early, but then 210 stand between Brown and Ward took them almost to the brink. And then both of them fell, but with the momentum still very strongly in England's favour, they were able to take a six wicket victory that took the series. So again, it's a case of one of these astonishing momentum swings, one way and then the other. I think it's one of the wonderful things about the way that cricket is played, that it gives the opportunity for the momentum to really build up, and then suddenly it can change so dramatically, and almost a single ball can do that. It's astonishing.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a final game, isn't it, when you're batting? It's once you're done, there isn't any getting back into the game until you'll go again. And I think that's something that's unique to cricket. I guess you could argue baseball maybe as well, but it's very much, how can you hold on to it? And that was what cricket was before white ball cricket came in. It was about wickets.
Yeah, very much so.
It was about runs. It was hold on to your wickets, the runs will come later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the Ashes is the biggest thing in cricket, especially if you're English or Australian. And we're all looking, aren't we, to this winter and to see what will happen. I guess we're very excited. We've got now some really fast bowlers, Wood, Art, put it around their ears and almost give the Aussies as good as they get.
Well,
so it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, let's hope so.
So I mean, obviously we're excited for the Ashes, and it is a massive part of cricket history. And obviously from the series where the bales were burnt and they were put into the little urn. For those of you that don't know what was in the urn, it is, I believe, the ashes from the bales of a pretty torrid series which England lost.
Yeah, and then scraped back with the fourth. They won the Ivo Bly tour. They won the first three out of the first three matches. They won it 2-1, and that was what effectively sealed the Ashes. But then they added another match at the end of it as an exhibition game, which Australia won. So the actual series was a draw. But the other thing about that, of course, is that the Ashes that were presented to Ivo Bly were actually presented to him by one of a small group of society ladies in Melbourne, who then became his wife, Lady Darnley. When he, because I think her name was Florence, she married him. She became Lady Darnley when he inherited the title. And after he died, she then presented the Ashes to the MCC at Lords to be the perpetual trophy for the England-Australia Test cricket.
Wow!
So I thought that was quite a nice finish to it.
That's lovely. It's quite story, isn't it? And I think that's probably why the series has stood the test of time, is it's associated with so many amazing stories from its inception to date. So many contests through the turn of the century. So Grace himself, and obviously Victor Trumper, the Australian batsman, and Jackson from Lancashire. And then you go into the period between the wars, and Bodyline and Bradman, McCabe, and then immediately post-war, the 1948 Untouchables, when Bradman was in his final years. And of course, that final test when he was bowled second ball for a duck, when he'd otherwise, if he scored 4 runs, he'd have averaged 100 in Test cricket. And I believe
Lindwall and Miller.
I believe it's well documented that he got 0, but his batting partner got 100, and no one ever remembers that his batting partner.
I'd forgotten that. But it was it was another one of those moments that kind of cemented Ashes cricket in kind of the minds of particularly those who have a little eye for the history of the game. It's just created so much of a mystique around the Ashes that gives it that aura that makes it so special for everybody.
Yeah. There's a lot of families, isn't there, involved in cricket? It's a very family-orientated game. It's
very much so.
I mean, I always talk about army families, and I always talk about cricket families. You know, it's a lot of cricket is in your family. It really is.
Absolutely. I recently found on that particular point, found a letter from one of my great aunts, which she sent to me, the 14-year-old me, back when I had hair there and none here, in 1978. And she wrote to me saying, "I'm delighted that you're interested in cricket. I played at school, no game to beat it." My mother had a brother, Harry Whitehead, who played for the county, Lincoln, in his time. He could knock up a century like shelling peas. When he died 2 years ago in his 80th, I wrote to his son saying that as long as leather knocked against willow in Elson Park, this is up in Lincolnshire, the name Harry Whitehead would echo through the walnut trees. Happy days of my childhood, bringing back memories of Elson Park, cricket on Saturday afternoons, the marquee with lovely strawberry and cream teas provided by my grandmother who kept a farm, and the smell of grass and the chatter and laughter. The lord and lady of the manor used to come down to watch, and people cycled for miles around, including my father, all the way from Sheffield, 60 miles. Yeah. And that to me conjures up beautifully those images of cricket in another time, but also that sense of family connection that all I can say is I just wish that the genes for actually scoring runs and batting competently had somehow made their way down to me. But it was a lovely relic to find this. I mean, astonishingly, the fact that it survived over 40 years from 1978, and I've still got it now. It's a great discovery to find that again. And what to me is also of value in that is that it brings to life, you know, when you do the who do you think you are thing, and you start digging through census records and birth, marriages and deaths, all those formal official statutory records. What they don't do is bring the people to life, and things like this actually add a dimension, add a color to the people, to the lives that they led, to the relationships they had, which I think actually is an enormous enrichment to the bare bones, the skeleton of the statutory records, those census figures, the records of births and marriage and deaths, but the flesh that fills out those bones are these little human stories, and the way in which previous generations actually then phrased their memories. You know, I love that line of so long as leather knocks against willow, the name will echo through the trees. It just conveys a vast richness, not simply to her own memories, but also it kind of implants those as an image in your own mind, and it really strengthens that connection.
Oh yeah, I think it's one of those things where, well, firstly, it's why you are a historian, Ian, because you can unearth letters such as those. But also, I think family stories bring, as you said, bring cricket to life. And I certainly think that something this show will be looking to do is to highlight more family stories as time goes on. And please feel free to send those.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It'd be wonderful if people can find similar memories, similar mementos like that actually help bring the impact that cricket had in their lives into a clearer picture, brings out the not only the detail but the richness of those family memories. It really does help to build up the story of the game and also the family's involvement in the game.
That's a great point, Ian, and I think probably a great time, time to close our first bite size of a bit of history, a cricket history. I certainly think that there are many more tales to come. And just out of interest, what wine have we got tonight? What vintage?
This is it's a very young 2019 Merlot. I've got a steak pie to come, and I thought something that's a little bit cheeky, a little bit tannic will balance it quite nicely.
Fantastic.
Cheese and port to follow.